Hello and welcome to the AI Digest. My name is Joaquin Melara, and with me is Rebecca Grier, Dr. Rebecca Grier. I want to put the honorific on that. You've earned it. Rebecca, it's a pleasure to have you. I see you're skipping stones by the seaside. What's going on?
That is a picture taken from my parents' home in Florida at one night at sunset.
And you're not based out of Florida, you're based out of Ireland, right?
I am. Yes, I'm a dual U.S. Irish citizen, and I live in Dublin now.
Um, what is there to do in Dublin?
Oh, what isn't there to do in Dublin? I have I have a small child, so we spend a lot of time going to playgrounds. But there is a really good zoo. There's a really great art museum. There is tons of literary history. There is pubs and music. There's lots of great seaside walks. Lots of small towns to explore around Ireland.
I want to ask because you're well traveled and you said you're a dual citizen, so you've been in the U.S. and you've been in Ireland. Is it true, or can you confirm or deny this phenomenon that the makeup of the city influences the behavior of people? Sometimes cities, when they're densely packed together, people walk and talk faster, like
Hmm.
Dublin and New York, as opposed to cities that are more far apart, like California. It kind of slow down your way of modulating speech.
I've never noticed that or commented. Dublin is actually very spread out, and it is
Hmm.
not nearly as dense as it is the by far the densest city, densest environment in Ireland. It is a roughly a quarter of the entire Irish population lives in Dublin or around it, but it is quite spread out. It is more like Detroit in terms of single family homes rather than dense apartment buildings and things like
Well, that went out the window then. You shut me down immediately. um, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about your background. You are an independent or a consulting freelance behavioral scientist, and you specialize in human factors. What the cool kids nowadays refer to UX research and strategy. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and how you do it?
Yeah, so I love to study how people interact with technology and then help to design technology that is user friendly. So, human factors is a field that started. It traces its roots over 100 years ago, but really came into being in during World War II, and there won't go through the history too much. But as technology has advanced and as technology has become more and more of our lives, it's it it evolved from human factors, which focused a lot on the errors and preventing errors with technology, and how effectively and efficiently the human machine system could be, to the UX research, which is more about, still considers all of that, but is less about the errors and more about delighting people, and coming up with cool ways of solving people's problems and giving them new ways to do things going forward. And strategy, so research is doing still that research of how do humans interact with technology, what is the human problem that we're trying to solve, what are the contextual factors and the user factors that we need to consider in the design of that technology. And then strategy is basically under very clearly stating what are the human needs that need to be solved by a technology, or where are the advantages of improving the UX or the user experience with that piece of technology.
And prior to this discipline taking place and being a little bit more widespread, what were some of the problems that people were encountering, or what were the symptoms of not proactively thinking about these human factors?
Oh, any there are great cartoons out there that I wish I could show, but like if you fat pressing a button, the wrong button on a keypad or something like that means that the keypad was not designed with the right ergonomics. If people saying, "Oh, I just don't get technology," I'm really bad at technology, that means the technology wasn't designed for you as a user of the technology.
Mm.
Um, um, Anytime you struggled to figure out, what am I supposed to do here? What am I supposed to press? Why do they need this piece of information? That is all stuff that was not designed with a human in mind, the user in mind.
So let's break this down a little bit further into their atomic parts. How do you define behavior?
Psychologists, behavioral science define behavior as the thoughts and actions of a human.
And what does a scientist do? What
So,
what 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 do scientists do? Jeez.
so scientists use the scientific method to study and whatever it is that they study. In the case of behavioral science, it's to study the thoughts and actions of humans. The scientific method is really an empirical and deductive approach to gathering information and to creating insights, as opposed to critical evaluation and thought experiments, critical analysis, which are used more in other inductive methods that are used more in the humanities.
And when we combine these terms together, behavioral scientists, you're evaluating the thoughts and behaviors of people, the actions of people under that purview of collecting evidence, making observations, designing experiments, and feeding
Yep.
that feedback loop, right?
Yes.
Mm. And you mentioned a little bit about human factors, how people engage with technology, how technology can be constructed with people in mind based on some sort of maxims, right? I mean, there are some guiding principles for designing things to be human friendly. Can you just tell us a little bit about maybe some maxims or some like immediate signs of like this wasn't designed with people in mind?
Oh, yeah, there are maxims, but but there are a lot of them. My favorite place to go looking for maxims is the Mill Standard 1472, which is the Department of Defense's, and because the Department of Defense literally touches every kind of technology there is, every kind of technology is in there. The first one that comes to the top of my head is that if you're doing something that has color coding, so a diagram of some kind, think of a subway map, and you shouldn't have more than 7 lines and you shouldn't have more than 7 colors. If there are more than 7 lines on your subway that you need, or your transportation map, then you need to use something other than color to distinguish, because the human mind can't keep distinguish between those more than 7 colors for the purposes of saying, this is the line that I need, and this, the red line is the one that I need, or the pink or the fuchsia. You get to that point, that's fine if you're for other things where you don't need to know exactly what color. If you're talking more of a range or a saturation, there are maps for that, or reasons to do that. If you're working with a colorblind population, then you don't want to just use color coding. You want to use what's known as dual coding. So you have a color and a symbol. And that every time you see that color, you see that same symbol. And that helps to do things, helps to make it distinguishable for everyone. If you're asking people to memorize things or to keep something in their brain, you want to chunk that information, and you want to keep it to no more than 7 chunks. George Miller's 7 plus or minus 2 is the maxim for that, and he found, and that's why actually George Miller did that research at the behest of the phone company back in the 40s, 50s. I can't remember. And that is actually why, when they switched from operators making all the calls to people dialing numbers, the 10-digit number in the United States, and what's mostly a 10-digit number in the world, with 3 as an area code, 3 as a preface, and 4 as another, was because that creates the chunks that we need to be able to memorize, even or short-term use, long-term use, phone numbers.
You had a quote in our email communications from the astronaut John Young.
Yes, so that's one of my favorite quotes. He was on Apollo 10, which was the test run for Apollo 11, the flight that landed on the moon. So they did everything. John Young and the other astronauts on Apollo 10 did everything that Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and I'm blanking on the last person's name, did, except for landing on the moon. But as they were finishing up and about to come home, they committed an error. Both John Young and the other astronaut flipped a switch in the sequence simultaneously, not knowing that the other was going to do it. And this sent the spacecraft into heavy spins and rotations, which almost became gimbal lock. And so they almost lost complete control and ended up being in space. And when he came back from the mission, he said, computers should be user-friendly. They shouldn't try, when you make a mistake, they shouldn't kill you. So yes, if a system is going, if somebody could die because they hit the wrong switch, that is not a user-friendly system. And there are tons in the history of technology of systems or near misses and cataclysmic events that were based because the user interface was bad. The Vincennes incident that shut down a U.S. Where a U.S. Navy ship shot down an Iranian airliner. 3 Mile Island, a near nuclear disaster. Chernobyl is partially based on human factors. Bhopal, which is one of the worst chemical disasters ever. Numerous airline crashes in the 70s, all were related to bad human factors.
And one of those things that I'd like to point out is human factors also goes into the illities, the qualities of a system, right? Maintainability,
Yes.
adoptability, usability, accessibility. You mentioned that with the dual coding of colors and symbolisms to create affordances, right? Create some sort of mind embedding. Do you
Yes.
want to talk a little bit about that under the purview of ISO standards?
So yeah, there are lots of ISO standards that are specific to human factors and usability. I don't know all of them. I know that there is one ISO 9241, if memory serves, part 11. I could be wrong about the numbers. Haven't had to cite them in a long time. But it was written in the 1990s, late 1990s, and it actually defined usability as the extent to which a specified user could use a specified system. The extent to which a specified user can use a system to achieve their specified goals with efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction within a specified context. So when you're talking about human factors, when you're talking about usability, when you're talking about accessibility, when you're talking about maintainability, so these are all about, can the person use this technology to accomplish the goal where they needed to accomplish it? And with all of the other systems that they're thinking that they might interact with. So for a maintainer, their goal would be to maintain the system. So can they actually perform the maintenance in the timeline that it needs to be performed? How often are they having to perform that maintenance? Is it, how much effort does it take? How much time does it take for them to do those maintenance tasks? These are all, can they do them in an environment? Do they need specialized tools? Can those tools be brought to the location of the system, or does the system need to be going to that location? How do we get that system to that location if that's the case? All about maintainability, which is a subset of usability. I mean, there's other stuff related to maintainability that are related to reliability of the system. But good systems with human factors talk about the reliability of the system. And so then when does the human have to step in and do something to make sure that the system is working correctly, as well as how likely is the human to be able to do the things that the system requires of the human, so that the total system performance is where we want it to be.
In the context of artificial intelligence, you said that there were a few human factors that the top three that came to mind to you. Can you explain a little bit about what they are?
Oh, let's see if I remember the top three. I told you.
Trust and automation, function allocation, and ecological interface design.
Yes, thank you. So trust and automation is paramount in that a lot of the AI that I have seen, I'm not going to say that I've seen everything, but basically I put in a request and it spits out an answer, and it's a black box,
Mhm.
and in every time that black box spits out something that I know to be false, I lose trust in the system, um, and it's worse. So, but a lot of times people are putting in requests for things that they don't even know. So they have no ability to check if the answer is the right answer or not that they're getting. Um, this is where ecological interface design comes in, is that if you do ecological interface design properly, you are giving clues to the user as to the confidence the system has or how the system came up with that response, so that they can then judge whether that response is the right response, or whether how they need to tweak it so that it's a better response. So there are, instead of just spitting out one response, if it's not 100% certain on what it's going to do, spit out many responses. And kind of say, these are the reasons, this is the evidence for this is the evidence for this, I'm not sure. Famously, on oh gosh, I'm dating myself. I think it was 10, 15 years ago, IBM's Watson played on Jeopardy in the United States. And on one final Jeopardy question, it gave Toronto as the answer to the final Jeopardy question, which most anybody else could have known as Chicago, or definitely wasn't Toronto, because Toronto wasn't a United States, wasn't in the US, and it said it clearly had to be in the United States. And Watson actually had been programmed with some ecological interface design, not a lot, but that it spit out the answer with a question mark, meaning it wasn't confident, and only because it was Final Jeopardy was it giving that answer. If it had been a question earlier in one of the other rounds, it wouldn't have given the answer. So, I mean, that's one specific case, but the more we can show to people what's going on under the hood, and I don't mean all of the algorithms and stuff like this, but giving them some sense of why it's doing what it's doing and exposing that to them, the more confidence and the more trust in automation. And in human factors, we talk about different kinds of trust. There's overtrust, undertrust, and mistrust, along with correct trust. Overtrust is I put in something into an AI system and I just accept what it gives me, but it might be wrong. Undertrust is can occur when I realize it's been giving me wrong stuff. So I say, I'm not going to use that AI anymore. It's just going to sit over there and it's never going to be touched. Mistrust is I'm going to use AI for this thing, but not for this thing. And I really should be having it do instead I should be using AI for certain tasks and not for other tasks. And I'm using them incorrectly. Mm-hmm. Correct trust is I actually am using AI in the correct times, and I am checking it and verifying it when I need to. I know that was a lot of words, and and then the last one was function allocation, and this is basically assigning to humans the tasks that humans are best at, and assigning to technology what technology is best at, and figuring out how to get the two to work together so that they can be even better than one alone.
I think in all these qualities, in all these documented areas and human factors, it's also, you can take these qualities and put them on top of an imaginary person as a system. You want to have a level of transparency, explainability for you to be able to understand the motivations, the thinking process, the behavior that the imaginary person or the system can provide so that you can trust it. Um, if, if somebody lies to you, you're not going to trust it. If it bolsters its ranks and you say that it's a higher authority than you, and it could reason far above your capabilities, you might overtrust it. But that's just an observation that I wanted to bring up.
Now, there's a whole field of human factors research on trust and automation, and they basically have said the same thing in terms of trust and human-robot interaction and trust and automation, that it's essentially the same characteristics of trust between people. Um, at their core, trust is trust. Um, the signals you need to get from technology are a little different. And some people tend to trust technology more than they should.
And that leads to catastrophic, life-endangering situations,
It can.
potentially. Let's define user experience research and strategy. You talked a little bit about it, but can we break that up into the three parts, the three phases that you wrote in the email? You said discovery, directive, and evaluative.
Mm-hmm. So directive or discovery or formative, some people call it generative research, is where you are trying to define, going back to that ISO definition, you are trying to define who are the users, what are their goals, and what is their context of use, as well as how do they define efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. Oftentimes, these users are accomplishing this goal in some other fashion right now. So you also want to understand how are they doing that now? What is good and bad about that current solution? And what are their users' priorities for improvements? You also want to know about who else, even though they may not be directly using the system, who else could be impacted by any changes to the system. So that's the first phase of research. The second phase of directive research. And in directive research, you really want to understand, you want to pick your solution. So you've got all of that information that you have from your generative or your discovery research. There could be lots and lots and lots of different ways of solving those problems. In directive research, you're figuring out what is the right solution for everybody. So we all work in businesses. Those businesses want to make money. They have goals. They have constraints related to costs, schedule, and there's certain technology feasibility. So in directive research, you're looking at the technology. How feasible is it to do certain things for a technological viewpoint? Can they be done in a certain time frame, built in a certain time frame? How reliable is that technology? And then you're also, so that's less the human factors person and the more the whole team, but the UX person, UX research. The UX side of the house, though, is looking at, hey, this is solution 1, solution 2, solution 3, and going, does this actually, what does it change about what the user does? So from what they're doing today, and is what we're doing actually either more effective, more efficient, or better satisfaction than what they're doing today, without degrading the other two, so that the total of those three is better, which would mean that it was a better value for the person in terms of to adopt it. So once you've adopted your solution, if through the directive research, then you start building the technology, and that's when the evaluative research starts coming in. Throughout that building, you're going to be faced with trade-off decisions, and there's a lot of UI decisions that will go in as well, and you will do research iteratively to make sure that what you're building, how you're building it, is actually the right thing for the user as well. And it's also, once the system has been launched and given to the public, you're monitoring the KPIs for the system to make sure that it's meeting the business goals, because it's being good for the user, and that those and if it's not meeting the KPIs, or you want to improve those KPIs, what can you do to make it even better going forward?
And if we were to boil this down, the user research, user experience research, we're really doing two things, right? We're learning, we're setting up some sort of experiment and learning throughout that experiment, but we're weaving in between those two main areas, right? The idea is generate possibilities, choose a few options, exercise those options, generate possibilities, choose a few options, and rinse and repeat until you get to a point where it's satisfactory to scale production and eliminate proactively a lot of the human prone errors, right? And also just to make sure that it matches the ilities, the human factors, right?
Yes. Yeah, that it's usable, that it's maintainable, that it's accessible to people with disabilities. People will enjoy using it, not just that there's no errors, but that they enjoy it. those are all the things you want in a system that you release. And if you've done the UX research, done the UX strategy, done the UX design, you should have a system that makes people's lives so much better at the end of it.
I want to say that I just want to include a little bit about your background here. You worked for companies like Microsoft, Google, Ford. You mentioned already the U.S. Department of Defense to inform policy and product design around a wide range of complex and disruptive socio-technical systems and products. You do this for a living, and you also provide training services, that right? Do you
That
want
is
to
true, yes.
what kind of training do you provide, and what's been the impact of that training?
Yeah, I provide a lot of different kinds of training. So I do provide training on how to do user research. The one that is most popular is my survey course on how to write surveys and how to administer surveys to get data. But surveys are only one of the methods of doing user research, and I have courses on others methods as well. And then there is the course that I love giving as well called How Humans Think, which really talks about what we know about how the human brain works, and how humans process information, and then how to use that to actually create systems that are user friendly for the users.
And what kind of companies would most benefit from your services?
Oh, any company that is trying to figure out how to set up a UX program, or maybe has one but wants the engineers to better understand why UX is important to the success, or customer experience is important to the success of their products and services, I would be happy to give the courses to.
So you'd be like a catalyst for something that's already in motion, but not necessarily to stand something up as an independent, right? You kind of are a force multiplier, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
Okay. Um, so let's talk about what does it mean to manage complexity? What does it mean to work in complex environments? I think we've given hints, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, complexity is one of those really tricky things. I think if somebody could figure out how to define complexity, they would win a Nobel Prize or something along those lines. But I tend to think of complexity as highly dynamic, non-deterministic systems, composed of non-deterministic and highly dynamic systems. So system of systems with all of these components. And so you can't easily say, if I do X, then Y will happen. There's a ton of different variables. And that's where a lot of that ecological interface design comes into, is that you're explaining to the user what the information is that these systems are taking in, and how that information, how the algorithms are weighting that information to be presented to the user so that they understand, oh, okay, this makes sense that this was chosen, or yeah, that makes sense, but it's not considering why, and so I'm going to change not going to do what it says. I'm going to tweak it a little bit by doing this. The more complex a tool is, the less likely the human understands what's going on under the hood, and the less likely they're going to be able to use it in all situations effectively. And there's greater chance of bad things happening.
When you used the ecological before and
Yeah.
defined another part of human factors, but when you say ecological, you mean the broader environment of the thing that you're building, and how it can give signals or indicators as to how it's performing or what it's doing.
So that is a very important part of human factors. But ecological interface design actually comes from a branch of psychology called ecological psychology, created by a man named J.J. Gibson, who actually is the person who coined affordances. And essentially it is that the world, J.J. Gibson believed that we don't perceive things out there. Instead, we perceive what we can do with them. And that is what he termed an affordance, is like that I know I can turn a door handle. I can push certain doors and I can pull certain doors. I can turn knobs because it has an affordance. If I see a chair, I can either sit in it or I can stand on it, depending on what my goal is at the time. So ecological interface design is all about showing what is it that a person can do with this piece of technology instead of just having them memorize what it is that they do at the end. And it's about making how the system works for the human more apparent.
And when you say complex, is something that's hard to define. I mean, I think you gave a pretty good description, and we can go back to that 7 variables plus or minus two.
Mm-hmm.
Anything above that is just complexity. So when you work in these things, sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, I mean, so the 7 ± 2 is more about what we can hold in our short-term memory than it is about. So as we get expertise about things, we then create bigger patterns in our brain, and it allows us to handle more complexity. Um, but yeah, how I think complexity is more about how easy is it for somebody to say, if I do A, then B is going to happen.
Non-linear, non-deterministic.
Yes.
Okay. So when you work on these, when you've worked in these companies, when you worked on these socio-technical products, systems, what do you classify as disruptive? How do you define that?
Yeah. The definition of disruptive I tend to agree with the most is one where the business model fundamentally changes because of this technology. And sometimes we want that disruption, sometimes we don't. Kodak is a great example of not. That they invented digital cameras, but they were making most of their money from processing print film. So they didn't really release digital technology because they didn't want to disrupt that market. So if you are working on something highly innovative, it is most likely going to change the marketplace. And so you need to be thinking about that business model along as part of that whole socio-technical system. And is that, how do you not take advantage is the wrong word, but how do you leverage that change so that your goals are met along with the goals of everyone else? So the business is one of the users of that should be considered in user experience.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're saying, how do you take advantage? I mean, it's the world that we live in, and there are things that I think, as you grow and evolve in society, that you're programmed to sort of engage with. You said twisting a doorknob. If you just came from the wild and you've never encountered a twisty doorknob, you might not know how to engage with it. But anyone else, once you've engaged with that once or twice, you would be better suited or adaptable towards that kind of mechanism. Um, when you say socio-technical systems, what do you
Mm-hmm.
mean? I
So at their simplest, a socio-technical system is just is any system, any technology really, because it has to be used by a human. There are very few technologies that aren't used by humans. Satellites, although a human, once they're launched, no human interacts with them, but physically, but we use the data from them, and and there is maintenance procedures that are sent up to them and back and stuff like that. But they are they do a lot of things automatically once they're off there, but they're still giving us information. And even in that case, we've just mentioned 3 users for a satellite. There is the person who is maintaining it, making sure that it is giving us the right information, that it's working in properly and going to continue giving us good information. And then there are whoever it is that's consuming that information. So if it's a communication satellite, is it sending the right signals? Is it giving the right signals? If it's a weather satellite, is it giving, what information? How is it presenting that information? Do the people know the lag on that information? So we're talking about at least 3 sets of users just on a technically unmanned system.
Before we started the recording, I referred to socio-technical systems as working within organizations. I thought of it as human machine interactions, and you said that they can be, but your area of focus is working within an organization to produce a socio-technical system that is used, that is engaged with by an outside group of people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have worked on systems. One of my first jobs was at a phone company, and I worked on systems that the operators in that phone company used. Um, I tend to work on technology that is meant to be sold, or meant to be used by somebody different than who built the technology. But I have also but you could definitely use all of the human factors experience and knowledge to help you design better organizations for employees. And there is a sister of UX called employee experience, or EX.
And that's working in within the organization as opposed to without.
Yeah.
Apart from your work in organizations, you also are contributing to scientific journals, conferences, books, reports, standards. What are you hoping to accomplish with that kind of work, disseminating your experiences and lessons?
Yeah, it's been a little while since I have published in those organizations or at conferences and journals, but I have a PhD, and I did enjoy graduate school, and I enjoyed conducting research, and sometimes that research is meant to be applied and digested in terms of a product, or a piece of technology, and sometimes I like doing research that is going to help advance the science of human factors and the science of UX research, so that other folks who choose to do UX research or choose to do human factors can benefit from research that I've conducted to make them better at their jobs.
Um, hmm. And this is in line with your training. This is in line with the work that you do. You sort of help disseminate the reasoning why you champion change by first changing minds and then sort of orchestrating this is how we're going to tackle this because this is going to lead to better outcomes, right? You're a change maker in that regard, that you engage with people before you can engage with the actual product itself.
Yeah, I mean, the changing behaviors is really at the core of human factors, in terms of we want people to have good experiences interacting with the technology, and so we want them to do the right thing. And so maybe it's not changing their behaviors, but telling them what the behaviors are they're going to help, hinting to them what are the behaviors that are going to help them accomplish their goals. And then oftentimes in organizations, helping them to understand that it takes knowledge of behavioral science to make customers want to adopt your product, to make customers use your product in the correct ways, and that and so getting people to understand those underlying things so that they can then go forward, and make products that people want to use and that people do use.
You said something that I'm going to quote you on for sure after this podcast recording is over, that it's easier to make products that people are capable of using, that are able to adopt to, than make people adapt to the use of a product.
Yes,
Can you
it is.
explain that nuance?
Yeah, so it's easier. The world we live in is highly designed by us. Almost everything in the world is designed by us. If it's, an organization, if it's a piece of technology, we design it, and we can change those designs, and we can change how an organization is designed. We can change how a piece of technology, the user interface, we can change the back end of a system. We are fighting, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe years of evolution that have gotten our brains to do the things that our brains do, and to take the actions, and trying to rewire people's brains, from the biology that we have, and then adding on to that the I, as a human being, have lived on the planet for a couple of decades, more than a couple of decades. And from that, my brain has wired in a certain way, and there are certain patterns that I expect of things. Changing those patterns now is harder for me than just giving me technology that is going to leverage those patterns that I already have in my brain.
I'd like to just discuss change management because you brought that into the conversation. What are some of the factors? What is change management, and how do you facilitate it with design? I think that's a really interesting um, little topic
Yeah.
to cover.
Change management is not necessarily my forte. So I'm not the best person to ask about what is change management, but I think change management, it comes down to that you you want an organization to do something to be better, and that you have identified a change to processes or procedures um, in order to make that organization better. And people are resistant to change, but if you how you present that change to people, and how you reward that change, and how you present it to folks, and how people you involve people in creating that change, all leads to more success in change management, in changing the organization, than if you just say, here, I've changed the organization, do it this way now.
When you design products that are meant to be sold, in your design, in your work, you're lubricating the adoption of that product, right? You're increasing the sales and usability of that product. So you sort of use symbols and affordances in the design of the product to um, make it less difficult for someone to accomplish a task and get that dopamine boost of I accomplished a task, I encountered less headache, and I gain recognition, I gain a promotion, I'm able to do more work in less time. What are some of the motivations behind the work that you do? Um,
Oh, that's interesting. I've never been asked that way. Um, I mean, I love science. I have never wanted to do anything other than science. And when I learned of behavioral science, and then when I learned of human factors and UX, uh, definitely was what I wanted to do. I also want to make the world a better place, and I believe that technology and designing systems, socio-technical systems, can make the world a better place for everyone, and make our the time that we have on earth more enjoyable, and uh, make us feel like we've productive, and that we were adding impact, and I want to help people do that.
I appreciate that. I enjoy that creative spirit and that it's focused on being a force of good. Um, so apart from your consulting work, yes, you share your knowledge. This is all part of the same theme. Um, what kind of work would you like to pursue in your current trajectory? What is the
Yeah.
ideal project that comes your way?
Oh, the
Sorry for
ideal.
dropping.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I've been thinking a lot about it, and I don't have a great answer right now. But yeah, I mean, I love behavioral science. I just do. And so I don't want to abandon doing science too much. Uh, and I love working on complex problems. So there's a ton of complex technology out there that hasn't been touched a great deal by behavioral science. Uh, Cybersecurity comes to mind, artificial intelligence comes to mind, machine learning, and many other tech. I mean, that's the great thing about the world is technology is constantly advancing. We don't know what's going to be the next a new wave of technology that happens in 10 years. And maybe folks are working on it now. I know that there are some UX researchers out there working on quantum computing, and that would be fascinating. You know, um, but also, I'm happy to just work on technology that I know is being used by folks to improve their lives. So anything in the medical space, or um, you know, educational space, anything that actually adds value to people's lives would be, and wants a behavioral scientist to help, I would be happy to do it.
You like science, you like acquiring a lot of information, a lot of facts, you like distilling that into insights and things that produce a meaningful direction and design choices, and you like sharing that information with teams, cross-disciplinary teams, to accomplish a common goal for good.
Mm-hmm.
um, so now let's bring that to policy. Part of your work involves policies, construction, setting, changing. How does policy involve all of those things that I just mentioned?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of policy in a number of years, but when I did work, except for organizational policies within companies that I've worked at, and I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I mentioned Mill Standard 1472 before, and that is a policy. It's a standards document. It says, if you're going to design a system for the U.S. military, and it does this, then it's going to have this kind of an interface and things of that nature. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying. It was just taking all of the knowledge that human factors has acquired in its 100-year history now, and distilling it into specific, actionable, usable factoids or maxims that people can then adopt and can check to see if their system follows that maxim or not. That was something I got to work on when I worked for the DoD. I also helped write policy when I worked on autonomous vehicles about making them accessible to people with disabilities. That was not just for Ford; it was for all of the anyone who was working on it, trying to build an autonomous vehicle. So policy is taking what I do and going one step above. So instead of just doing it for the organization to sell one product, it's about making sure that that suite of products all are good for the world.
It's programming the programmers, right?
Yeah.
Programming the people doing the designing and all that construction. Um, okay, let's take it into the application of your knowledge and expertise. What is human-centered design? What is a human-centered approach? And how do you ensure that when you get to the evaluative stage of this work, that you're in alignment with people, with humans?
Yeah. So human-centered design is basically, I mean, I think we've talked around it a lot. It's considering the system, the technology, and any technology interacts with, and considering any human that has to interact with that technology or who's affected by that technology as part of the system. And so considering what are the ramifications for the human, and not just saying, oh, the human can be a backup, or, well, this makes it better for this person, without considering how it makes it better. Does it make it better or worse for other folks? A system that is human-centered is easy to use, can be used by everybody who is supposed to be able to use it, and it makes the world a better place. So John Young's quote about being able to make a mistake with a computer and it not killing you comes to mind, and that is a well-designed system. If you are saying, if you're going, God damn it, I pressed the wrong button again, that's a bad system. If you or if you're not sure whether or not you've done something at all or correctly, then that means that the system wasn't designed with you in mind, or with anyone in mind, really.
Okay. And when let's take the scenario where you have to create a system from scratch, say to make toasted bagels.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you begin?
Oh, if I wanted to make if it's well, there are toasters out there. So the first thing I would do, or actually, there are bagels out there, and people eat them warm. So I would conduct some research to understand how people warm their bagels or toast their bagels nowadays. Find out what they like and dislike about those systems. Think about Also, why would we think that we can, what other problem? Maybe it's not a user problem. Maybe it's that all the methods for toasting bagels use too much energy. So we want to figure out a way to toast bagels that uses less energy. But for people to be able to adopt that system that doesn't require an electric toaster or, an oven of some kind that uses some kind of energy, then we need to make sure that it actually toasts better than what's available today. So what's effective for people? How quickly, how efficiently, how many steps does it take? How much time does it take to toast a bagel today? And then, is there something about when people say that they toast it in a toaster versus in a there's toaster ovens that are different than toasters, and then, or in an oven itself, like, is it because, it affects the consistency of the bagel? So defining what makes people satisfied with the way that they're toasting it now. Once we have all that information, then we can contemplate that new solution in terms of what all of those different factors.
But you always start with gathering as much information and sort of charting the course. What is the measurement of success? What is our north compass, right?
Yes. What is the problem we're trying to solve? How is it solved today, and how can we make it better? And what does better mean?
And now let's say that we're in an existing business, say an assembly line in an automotive manufacturing center. How would you go in to make improvements to what already exists?
So the first thing I would do is, again, gather data about how things are currently, and understand but also I would add, why are things the way that they are? And are there laws that are established? Are there procedures that are important for this to be able to build the machine? Are there costs associated with changing the technology in there? Is there training that would be, training on the machines that currently exist? All of these things. And then I would identify first and foremost, though, where there is room for improvement. Where are there lots of errors, or where is there lots of injuries? Where are things, if something goes wrong, where is it most likely to go wrong, and why is it to go wrong there? And then working on developing a solution to fix that, but considering all of those other constraints, because those would lead to less. If you don't think about all the other constraints, then you could come up with a great solution, but if it's too hard to switch to that new solution, or if it makes something else worse, then it's not a good idea.
I think with the theme of your work, the theme of your pursuit, your passion, I think we've gone across a very interesting array of topics, but it all falls down into a core framework of you like science,
Yes.
you incorporate the scientific method into your practice. The particular lens that you view the world is through people. How do we use the scientific method in the context of people? Um, what kind of words of encouragement or direction would you give to someone who likes science, who was in your shoes when you started your career, around science and pursuing a career and figuring out how they want to make an impact on the world, a
Yeah.
positive impact?
That is a good question. If I would have loved to have met somebody who did what I did back when I was younger, and interested in it, to give me advice. But I will say that in the time since I was in college and discovered human factors, and started my degree and started my career, the world has changed dramatically. And the path that was right for me, and the choices I made aren't even, I mean, they're still choices today, but I don't know if they're the choices I would have made, because the trade-off decision, there are many more options to studying, to getting into UX research, into UX design. If and UX strategy and human factors. And um, there are so much more resources available for knowing about this field than when I started my career.
Do you feel that there's a way that people can dip their toes into this type of work without having to get an internship or get a job? They're kind of just pursuing different passions. How would you recommend that they sort of just get their
Yeah.
degree?
So if they're already employed and they're at a company that is building anything, most likely they have UX design or UX research staff, I would hope. If they do,
Oh,
those if they do have those folks available already, then I if somebody came up to me and said that they wanted to learn what UX research was in a job and would say, I would help, I have my boss's permission to learn some stuff and to shadow you for a bit, I would jump at it. Because there's always more work to be done than there are trained hands. And I would gladly work on it. If you don't work, if that arrangement isn't possible, there are, and you are employed or you're a student, you can go on to LinkedIn, you can find people like me, myself, others out there. Flattery will get you everywhere. And if you just say, hey, I've read something you've done, or I've seen something you've done and I really liked it and I'd like to learn more about how you did that, most people will gladly give you a half hour of their time to do that. If you're in school, many universities have human factors departments, and you could, or if you're an undergraduate looking for it, you can find on the Human Factors and Ergonomic Society website in the United States, among other resources, graduate schools, and you can reach out to professors there and say that you're interested in going to graduate school for it. There are short courses that are available. There are online trainings from a wide number of places that are available. Though be careful, because some of them are better than others. And so always talk to people who have attended those programs, and see, and not just the people that they send you to, but find the people and ask people where they've gone and why they went to those places and what they would do differently. And when I say people, I mean recent people. So people who've gone to those programs in the last couple of years, if they aren't in a accredited university program. But like I said, if you just, if you can find a UX researcher in your organization and you say, I'd like to learn more about UX research, they will gladly do so.
Rebecca, it's been a great pleasure of mine to have you on the show and to understand your view of the world and get a little taste of your passion for what it is that you do and what pushed you to be in this space that you're in now and in your shoes today. Um,
It's been lovely chatting with you, Joaquin.
until next time, maybe we'll do a webinar of sorts.